Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Pathfinder 2E, second edition of Pathfinder. So just this week, Paizo, the company that makes Pathfinder, announced they are going to be releasing Pathfinder 2E, that this very year, within 2018, Pathfinder 2E playtest will begin. And then what we're going to see going forward is, we should probably expect a game in 2019, 2020. I don't think they've announced their projections at all, right? But it really is incredibly interesting. It is absolutely fascinating. So why is this a very interesting event within tabletop role-playing game history? Well, Pathfinder is a really unique tabletop role-playing game in that Pathfinder was born when Wizards of the Coast said, we're going to stop making Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 and we're going to make Dungeons & Dragons 4.0. And there was a whole large contingent of tabletop role players, of Dungeons & Dragons tabletop role players said, no, do not want, not cool with this. So, and, it was really fascinating because basically this caused a major rift within tabletop role-playing game overall. And Paizo came out of the gate, and since they had been making Dungeons & Dragons, since they had been making Dragon Magazine, they really knew how to create a high-quality product. And so they created Pathfinder, right? So now here's the issue. The Pathfinder community was birthed by a community that was saying, no, we do not want a new version. We want the same old version we've been playing for, I think it was 8 years. I think Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition lasted 8 years, right? And so, so the Pathfinder community is arguably one of the most new edition resistant communities that exist within tabletop role-playing games at the building creator level. Now, what do I mean by the building creator level? The reason why I'm talking about this today is we're talking about Paizo, okay? Now, Paizo is a really unique tabletop role-playing creator. And how are they unique, right? Well, it's a very distinct reason, and that is they're one of the very, very, very few companies in the world where when they want to make a new tabletop role-playing game, basically that's being done by full-time employees, right? So there are lots and lots and lots of, one-person TRPGs, TRPG companies, small teams that are making products remotely together. There's lots of tools to do this. It's very, very common today. But let's talk about the building creators. So when it comes to tabletop role-playing games and building creators, this is a company where every day, Monday through Friday on a weekday, somebody puts on their pantaloons, drinks their coffee, and drives into work to create a tabletop role-playing game, and they sit at a desk, and they have benefits and all that, right? It's a short list. It's Monty Cook Games, it's Wizards of the Coast, it's FFG, Fantasy Flight Game, Fantasy Flight Games. It's Evil Hat. I'm fairly certain they have their own building. And Paizo is one of them. So I don't even think the list extends over 2 hands, right, in the U.S. There might be, I think maybe Modifius on the international scene, but it's a very, very short list, right? And so Paizo is a very high-end tabletop role-playing game company, relatively speaking, and they made their bread and butter on Pathfinder. So for them to announce Pathfinder 2E is absolutely massive. And so I'm really fascinated by this because I really feel like I thought, I'm so interested to see what happens with this. My inclination would be that immediately their community would say, do not want, I want to keep the same. And the reason why is there's a ton of reasons why Pathfinder community would not want a new version. The source books stack 20 high for Pathfinder. There's just tons of them, right? And now with the announcement of Pathfinder 2E, all those books are darn near worthless, right? Because they're not the latest and the greatest. and they're legacy product. They're absolutely legacy product. Now there's going to be well, that's the other thing is, what will be the contingent says, no, I like these books, I'm going to keep playing this. Basically, is there now going to be like a splinter community that splinters off from Pathfinder to preserve Pathfinder 1E? That's a possibility now, and that is, like, the recursion here is so deep, Now, why is this happening? The reason this is happening is two reasons. One, Pathfinder is 10 years old, right? Now, this is the reason that Paizo talked about on the Kickstarter, right? But the reality is, the real reason that Paizo needs to be looking at Pathfinder 2E is Dungeons & Dragons 5E, right? That was really the death knell of Pathfinder, is basically, Pathfinder 1E found a rich, fertile soil to grow its product within the Dungeons & Dragons community, because everybody really disliked Dungeons & Dragons 4E, and it really split the community. But now, with Pathfinder 2E, right, now Paizo finds itself in exactly the same circumstance that, vexed Wizards of the Coast, right, when they tried to bring out when they tried to bring out 4th edition, right? So it's really crazy. This is, and I will say, I was shocked to hear this, because I really I thought Paizo would never, ever announce this. Now, I feel bad for the Pathfinder 1E purists, like the people who really like that game and want there to continue to be product. And I think it's a little bit sad whenever there's a community of people who are dedicated to a grouping of to one edition, and then they're done, right? Like, that's it. There will never. So at this point, there's probably maybe one or two books that are in the can, or that, but almost anything that's new development, all that'll get scrapped, right? Now, what is interesting about this event? Like, what is, if you, now, I got rid of, so actually that's a really good point. What's my history with Pathfinder? So I definitely played Pathfinder. I really liked Wayne Reynolds. He's one of the best tabletop role-playing game illustrators in the entire business. And so when it was time to switch over, I saw the great art that the game had, and I actually switched over and I bought probably 7 or 8 different Pathfinder books. I bought the $500. I bought the 500-page core rule book, and I bought the equipment guide, and I bought the NPC Codex. To this day, I think the NPC Codex is one of the best source books ever created for any tabletop role-playing game, and is really unique, and I wish they would do it for every single tabletop role-playing game out there, but they haven't. I bought the campaign guide. I think I bought, Advanced Magic and a few others, right? And so there was just a lot of really solid books out for that game. And, but even like 5 years ago, I realized that Pathfinder, actually, it was 6 months almost to the day after 5e came out, and I'm like, I'm never going to go back to Pathfinder because 5e is so strong. And so I sold off everything but my NPC Codex, my equipment guide, the bestiary, and the actual Pathfinder book, right? And so I sold off a lot of my core rule books, my source books on that game. So so I'm incredibly interested to see what they do. And so, so one of the things I was really curious about is, so now that they're jumping in, what does this mean? Well, this is great if you're really interested in tabletop role-playing game design. You get to watch Paizo, take the hits for going into modern tabletop role-playing game design, because modern tabletop role-playing game design is incredibly hard. It is incredibly hard, right? Now, what do I mean by that, right? Well, what's hard about modern tabletop role-playing game? Every single word matters, right? Every change you make has a possibility of just enraging the people who could possibly buy that game of yours. And so generally you want to preserve your current fans, as many of them as possible, although it is absolutely not possible to preserve all of them, because some of your changes are going to upset legitimately some of those players out there. And then, so you have that issue, and then you want to attract new players, right? Well, I've just been fascinated. Like, this only got announced like a few days ago, and already, the conversation is up and running. And one of them is, Pathfinder has already like thrown down the gauntlet with one major change in the game, which is how you refer to a player character's race, right? So, I'm a longtime Dungeons and Dragons fan, and when somebody says, "Hey, I'm playing in a new Dungeons and Dragons campaign," any decent DMG, any decent dungeon master or player's first question out of their mouth goes race and class, right? Because that will answer the answer to that question will answer 50 other questions, right? And the person's like, "Oh, I'm going to play a half-orc barbarian, or I'm going to play a human elf, or I'm going to play a human rogue, or I'm going to play an elf bard, so right out of the gate, like just like immediately, almost like here's the announcement of Pathfinder 2e. Here's our first major change. Here's the first thing that is going to garner discussion, right? And that is Pathfinder Paizo is saying we're getting rid of the word race and we're going to use ancestry, right? And I was like, whoa, okay, let's talk about it, right? So this is really interesting. So, basically the Pathfinder community converged and began discussions on this. And the idea was that they wanted to get rid of that, the reason why in the playtest, the Pathfinder playtest right now, ancestries is being used is because the idea that race is an insensitive word to refer to be a differentiator for a player character, right? And that so logically, where would you go if you're not going to use race? Well, one of the ones that a lot of people were bandying about, and they're like, ancestry, you skipped a few markers there, and people are saying, what about species, right? Well, species, a lot of people think that that's technically a better term. Now, it was difficult for me to understand that, and the reason why is I understand why you would go down the road of species, but species generally is a differentiator for animals, right? And like, these are humanoids, they're not animals, right? It seemed like that's a really bad idea, right? So basically, it seemed logical to me why you would not use species, right? Another concern that a lot of the game designers and people who are interested in Pathfinder 2e were saying was that species doesn't fit a fantasy setting, right? It absolutely doesn't fit a fantasy setting, right? So there's this idea that the word ancestries is more sensitive and doesn't have the problem of having a modern sound or a very technical sound the way species does, right? Now, my concern with the word ancestry is it's not, there's problems with ancestry, right? Because then how does this go then, right? Does this open up the door for true ancestry? So if I'm trying to play a dwarf character, what if, 3 generations back, the mother was human, half dwarf and half human, right? That could be part of my ancestry. That doesn't really speak to what I am. Am I a dwarf or a human or an elf, right? And so it's, and then I saw other words like being bandied about, like kind, like elven kind, mankind, elven kind, humankind. And so it's just, one of the things, so I love tabletop role-playing game design, and I honestly like to see how different companies go about it, because there's a lot of obstacles and pitfalls, and it's like watching American Ninja Warrior. You're going to have to see how they're going to traverse this crevice, right? And sometimes they fall, and you're like, oh, man, that was a hard hit. Or sometimes they leap over deftly, and you're like, yeah, look at that, So it's, it's absolutely incredible, and it's just so fascinating, all the motion and commotion that a new edition kicks up, all the dust it kicks up into the air, and it's really, really incredible. I'm just like, I'm so amazed that Paizo is going down this road, and so I'm going to be watching with bated breath as this sort of thing unfolds. One of the last things I'm going to say about this is it's really interesting thing too to see how they're dealing with the monetization, right? So one of the things they're doing right out of the gate is they're going to sell the playtest product, and this has been a thing for a while now, where There are companies who are like, we're going to sell Playtest Product. And you're like, sell Playtest Product? That's crazy, right? You know, that seems crazy. Like, that's like selling a half-baked cake, right? You're going to sell that? Like, you know, like you would think that logically you would just give that away for free and say, oh, there's value in getting your feedback back. But in many ways, if you're selling if you are selling the Playtest product, you are literally having somebody pay you to give you feedback. It breaks like every logical step within not just tabletop role-playing game design, but within regular product design. It is insane, right? So this is truly, we are in unprecedented territory, and I am absolutely fascinated to see where this goes. So Pathfinder 2E, let's start it. Take care.